If you find yourself here for the first time, this episode is part 2 of a 2-part story about Mallory Grossman. Part 1 explains the burden Mallory endured because of bullying, as well as the legislation that was in place to help prevent stories like this.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text the crisis text line at 741-741.
This is what should scare the hell out of parents, because the exact same signs that are for what I consider to be impulsive hurting. And remember, we're not just talking about suicide. We're talking about self-harming. Our conversation doesn't need just to be to focus on the children who might end their lives. It has to be on the children who are permanently damaged, who self-harm, cut, strangulation, to slow breathing. There's a whole psychology behind it's not just death. But to answer that, the sad, scary part is the same characteristics are the same characteristics for puberty.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Welcome to Awareness, a show that delivers the story beyond the headlines. As parents, we spend our lives moment by moment trying to protect our kids from harm. Every moment life offers, we try to anticipate the dangers our kids may face. Our generation was raised on tough love, believes in sticks and stones. We were told to fight back, to toughen up, to defend ourselves. That was a different time, a different era. Those rules don't apply now. The game has changed. Technology has changed it. We haven't, and we need to. We are pretty good at shielding our kids from physical harm. But what about the emotional and spiritual harm? Little consideration was given to that when we were growing up. We had time to charge our batteries, to disconnect from bullying while at home. Social media was nowhere in sight. Those crucial moments spent with our friends and family, away from the bullying, nurtured us to resilience, gave us a fighting chance. They lifted our spirits enough to face another day. Technology has infiltrated those moments. The effects of bullying are now with our kids 24/7. No time to recharge, no time to heal. If you are lucky enough to find yourself listening today, I want to tell you that your journey to this moment started back in 2005. On April 22nd, in fact. This was the day that Mallory Rose Grossman came into this world. Mallory worked towards making this world a better place. She was kind to those around her, especially those with special needs. An old soul, those who knew her would say. However, her time with us ended too soon, and Mallory will be forever young. The effects of bullying a burden too much to bear. You see, on June 14th, 2017, Mallory left this world by suicide. Another life gone too soon. Tragically, this story is becoming all too common as we continue with the misguided notion of not my kid. My kid can't be a bully. My kid will never get bullied. Not my kid. If you believe that, then you can hope that this doesn't affect you. Or you can believe that hope is not a strategy and do something about it today. You see, when it comes to bullying, hindsight comes at an enormous cost. However, hindsight does provide us clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from experience. The kind that sharpens our focus and strengthens our resolve. There's no way to predict the future, no way to see how today's events can lead to a suicide. But what if there's a way to get the kind of clarity that only hindsight can provide? But we get it now. To use that hindsight to support our kids, to empower them. It is through the bravery and courage of families willing to share their hindsight, willing to share a deeply painful part of their lives, that we can gain this knowledge. Dianne Grossman and her family have done this and have mobilized an army that at its core teaches kindness. It's called Mallory's Army, and they have a message for us all. Dianne Grossman is with us today to lift the veil on bullying, to expose it for what it is: humiliation, exclusion, threats, and verbal abuse. And that's just to name a few. She is with us today not to talk about Mallory's death, but to talk about her life and how through Mallory's Army, she's trying to make a difference. If you have been affected by suicide because of bullying, then Dianne's voice declares that you are not alone. If you haven't been affected, then today is your lucky day, because Dianne's message will provide you perspective, guidance, and awareness. Today, Dianne has gifted us her hindsight, not so we can feel sorry for her, but rather so we can take action now, to change our behavior, to instill kindness in our kids, because it's needed now more than ever. We have lost Mallory's voice, the gentle sound of her laughter, now trapped in memories and recorded moments. It's time we find our voice. Time to change our behavior. Stay with me.
My name is Dianne Grossman. I live in Rockaway Township, New Jersey. My daughter is Mallory Grossman. She was 12 years old, and on June 14th, she died by suicide. I'm here today to share our story, share our journey, but also to become an advocate for what I consider to be bullying, which happens to be one of the most dangerous epidemic crimes that our children are facing at school. Mallory is and was your typical all-American little girl. Number one characteristic, she was very sensitive. She was a quiet child, very serious. A lot of times she's referred to as an old soul. But just an all-American little 12-year-old. Gymnastics, cheerleading. Our family goes camping for weekends. So just really, I think, really down to earth, kind of like your all-American tween. That was Mal. She always had an endearing perspective for children of special needs, children that were on the spectrum. One of the last children to say goodbye to Mallory at school was a child with Down syndrome. Mallory she had a philanthropic way about her. She would raise money for Camp Good Days. So she just had this really sweet spirit, which is kind of a unique personality trait for tweens. You know, they're very entitled, they're very self-driven, and Mallory just wasn't like that. So I would say her number one characteristic is she was a humanitarian to the core.
And I did notice in one of your Facebook posts that she was born on Earth Day.
Yeah. I actually do think that that is 100% deliberate. She was a very earthy child. And if we were to talk about this from a philosophy, spiritual side, I mean, maybe this is our journey. I'd hate to believe that I was quote unquote chosen to do so. And I would hate to see that Mallory as a sacrificial child. But I do think the fact that she was born on Earth Day and the fact that she was such a humanitarian, there's something to be said for that.
Sticks and stones. Our generation was indoctrinated by those words. When it came to bullying, it was our mantra. Most of us have experienced bullying, whether we have witnessed it or were a victim of it. So we were exposed to sticks and stones. I asked Dianne if she had experienced bullying while she was growing up and what it was like.
Sure. As a matter of fact, that's actually part of my presentation. When I travel to the schools, I tell 3 stories, and one of which is my own story. My parents divorced when I was 9 years old. And through that divorce, my mother lost wages, and I won't go into all the details, but long story short, I was kind of like the poor kid at school. And so when you're the poor kid at school, yeah, you're going to be bullied. I do want to touch on that sticks and stones philosophy, because I think the reason why a lot of parents are struggling with this is that I grew up in the early 80s, right? In the early 80s, you could say sticks and stones. We can't parent children like it's 1982 because it's not. And I believe that when someone calls you a jerk, or, our bullies no longer just take our lunch money. Okay. We're a diverse community. We are heavily populated, particularly in the tri-state area here. And children have raised the bar on hate. It's no longer you're the fat kid at school. It is now you're the fat kid at school. No one likes you and you should go kill yourself. That is not sticks and stones. Those are threats. That's assault. That's verbal abuse. We have defined things like revenge porn. And I believe that all these things are really connected and we need to pay attention to that. So the sticks and stones philosophy, I have a huge problem with that because I just don't think that worked in the 80s. It doesn't work today, particularly when our children have a much bigger reach through social media. There are 900 students at Mallory's middle school. Well, I don't know 900 people personally that I talk to, but in my social media world, I know 36,000. Well, that's a huge reach. And I think that we have forgotten that sticks and stones, it's not just about the words that are coming out of our mouths, but it's the reach that we have. It's the power to meet so many people that I think our children, we just can't accept that. I think it needs to be a hate crime.
With social media, kids are now more likely to contribute to bullying by trying to one-up each other's comments. This is called mobbing. We will be exploring this a bit further on a later episode. Dianne describes her experience with this behavior.
Yeah, and here's the other side of it is that you think if the person that writes the post, they're the bully. No, there's this gang style mentality. Like it, heart it, share it. Make a comment. Oh, you put their face on a donkey. We're going to put their body in a coffin. There's so many edits that they can do to the pictures that didn't exist back when we were growing up. And so we have to be mindful of that. We have to understand that they have such a bigger reach and that their hate is, and it's not just the person who writes the post. I believe anybody that endorses the post by liking it, sharing it, hearting it, and what have you, I think that they're also the bully. And unfortunately, parents don't want to hear that. But it's until we recognize the problem, we can't find a solution.
I asked Dianne if her perspective on bullying had changed since the 1980s, up until the time before she knew Mallory was being targeted.
Yes and no. So I think that what we as adults and parents need to be mindful of is that kids don't just all of a sudden see a kid and start bullying them. Not typically. There is this slow progression that happens that before you know it, it gets out of hand. So Mallory's hate kind of started in fourth grade, which is your normal, typical girls will be girls. So I'm parenting like it's the 80s. Girls will be girls. Mallory, just ignore it, right? Because in some perspective, children do need to have resilient behavior, which is what Sticks and Stones is. So I don't, kids are going to disagree. They're not going to like each other. This philosophy, I remember when Mallory was in, I want to say first grade, a teacher told her, different school system, but a teacher told her, we're all friends here. And I corrected her and said, no, we're not all friends here. It's that philosophy saying, oh, we don't all have to be friends here. We all have to be kind to one another and we have to respect one another, but we don't have to all be friends. And so again, the kids are being told, well, we're all friends. That's an unrealistic expectation for young minds. They can't fathom that. So it started in fourth grade, which is when the abuse really started, or I started seeing it. And by the way, the abuse wasn't just from kids, it was parents. Mallory would do cartwheels on the playground. The kids would go and tattle and say, well, I can't do a cartwheel. So the moms, which are the volunteers at recess, they would say, Mallory, you don't need to be doing cartwheels. They weren't saying that Mallory didn't need to do cartwheels because it was unsafe. Their kid couldn't do it. And so there is this little bit of exclusion and isolation that parents organically do also, that I think is really the basis of where this starts. I saw it start to escalate towards the end of fifth grade, where there was a deliberate attack against Mallory from the girls. Like at that point, they raise the bar. So I think what happens is children will push buttons, see how far they can go. Then they push another button, see how far they can go, push another button. And then it continues from there. By the time the adults in their lives figure out what the heck is going on, it often is too late. And you're trying to do an investigation in 10 days on something that's possibly been going on for 2 years.
Dianne explains that the cyber abuse that Mallory experienced was from people she knew in the physical world.
No, everybody that she had cyber abuse with, she knew. She absolutely, she wasn't allowed to have Snapchat or these other anonymous sites. So the people on her Instagram page, or the people that the 4 girls that were after her, no, she actually had a emotional, physical relationship with these girls.
So naturally, my follow-up question was, did Mallory have a mobile device?
Yep. She had an iPhone. She had to. She was in gymnastics. And again, I think that that's a really great point. I'm glad you brought it up. My platform, and I think it would be very irresponsible for parents to say, oh, my kid doesn't have a phone, they're not allowed on social media. Now, that's odd to hear from a mom like myself, but let me explain why. That is their social network. We created this world. Now, if you keep your kids out of social media, you are now isolating them. And one of the reasons why children that is their coffee shop. That's their roller skating rink. That's their bowling alley. We've created this world. And now we want to turn around and say, oh, but you can't have access to it. That's a really lonely place for children. So I don't think that the answer is to take away the electronic device. I think the answer is to parent it, not allow your children to be quote unquote friends with people they don't know. Don't give them access to social media where the platform is being anonymous, right? So Snapchat, Sahara, all of those. But I think that it's important that these are teachable moments. You can have social media, but you have to have it responsibly. So Mallory did have an iPhone. She had to have one. She was at practice from 4:00 in the afternoon until 8:00 at night. I needed to know when to pick her up, who I was driving home. This was our form of communication, and a positive form of communication. So I don't think that parents should go in this, well, my kid's not having social media. That's dangerous, I think.
Almost all of the experts that I researched agree with Dianne. We need to teach our kids digital civility and responsibility, not take away their devices. I asked Dianne at what age Mallory had her phone, and if she had any concerns or was aware of the dangers of being online.
Gosh, it was, let's see, Mallory was fifth grade, I think, into fourth grade, into fifth grade. I have three older children, so I was fully aware, not to mention that, I mean, as an adult that uses social media, I think parents have to be in a perpetual state of education. So I was in that perpetual state of education. So because I had older children, they were giving me the heads up. I had heard stories about certain apps. I knew about sexting and revenge porn. So I have to say that I was pretty savvy in some of those things. So we had serious rules. Number one, she could have social media. She could only have Instagram. She wasn't allowed to, if I saw her with a Finsta, which is the fake Instagram account, the Finsta, she knew that her phone would be taken away. And I said, you can have social media, but you have to use it for good. And again, that tapped into her humanitarian lifestyle. So it was a win-win for both of us.
I specifically asked about Dianne's awareness of cyberbullying.
Not to the gravity of, I think, that I do now. Of course, hindsight's amazing, right? I was aware of it, but because Mallory had a nice, close circle of friends outside of school, and because at that time, her life was really gymnastics, cheerleading, and she really didn't have a lot of interaction other than just from an education perspective. I really wasn't worried about it. I wasn't, which is, a responsibility that I will own for the rest of my life.
The reality is that most of us are like Dianne was. We've heard about today's bullying and cyberbullying, but we're not familiar with the gravity of the situation. Not my kid, right? I too was in the same boat last year, not fully being aware. The discussion now turns to the moment when Dianne realized that the bullying had become a problem.
Yeah, I would say probably October. See, all the kids of her sixth grade year, all of the kids in September are on their best behavior, right? They're going to make straight A's. They're dedicated. They've got new clothes. So I noticed that by October, the new sneakers are no longer new. The clothes have been washed. The books are, and the reality of school has settled in. And the first time that I was like, this is bigger than what I think it is when Mal came home and she was really upset. And one of the kids referred to her as a rich white kid. And I was like, whoa. That's kind of hate infused. That's no longer like, so I reached out to the school and said, and they were like, oh no, it's no big deal. And I was like, oh, it is a big deal because if Mallory called them poor and black, we would be having a completely different conversation. And by the way, the girls they're not African American. But I said, we need to make sure that this is referring to her race and it's referring to her economic status. Right then and there, I knew that this was going to be a problem. And so this is what should scare the hell out of parents, because the exact same signs that are for what I consider to be impulsive hurting. And remember, we're not just talking about suicide. We're talking about self-harming, because our conversation doesn't need just to focus on the children who might end their lives. It has to be on the children who are permanently damaged, who self-harm, cut, strangulation, to slow breathing. There's a whole psychology behind. It's not just death. But to answer that, the sad, scary part is the same characteristics are the same characteristics for puberty. How do you parent that? How do you determine between a child that is just experiencing normal adolescent, pre-teen behavior to suicidal thoughts? That's the scary part. So, loss of appetite. Okay, Mallory wasn't a big eater at school anyway. moodiness. Okay, well, she was starting to go through puberty. The edginess and the angriness, that sort of things. When Mallory was home and around her friends, her gymnastics friends, and those people, no signs whatsoever. The signs were isolated to school and her journey at school, which also led me again to believe that she's at school, it's stressful, she's changing classrooms. These are all normal characteristics that children face. Well, hindsight again, now I'm realizing that many of those signs, I think the biggest sign that I should have paid attention to was towards the end of the school year when she quit gymnastics. That should have been an aha moment. A child that had been competitively in gymnastics for a long time. On the other hand, the level that she was at is the magic level where they stop competing in gymnastics, because it kind of transitions into a much higher level, different category, much harder. And it's normal for kids in 6th and 7th grade at a level 7, 8 gymnastics to quit gymnastics. That's normal. So when I started questioning, they're like, this is the time when they usually kind of decide that they want to go hang out with their friends, do more things. Well, that was the exact excuse that Mallory gave me, was that she wanted to do after school activities, which she did. She joined clubs and did all that. So that should have been a red flag to me, but it wasn't, because I was told otherwise.
I asked what communication was like between Seth, Mallory's dad, and Dianne, if they had any discussions about the bullying.
We didn't have discussions about it because he was CC'd in every email that went to the school. So my biggest tip that I could ever give parents is that when you are communicating with the school, even if it's just about like lunch or who they're riding home with, always CC somebody else in the email so that no one can ever say, I didn't get it, or so that you're always, CYA. So because I come from the business world, I always know to do that. So Seth and I work together. So if there was a conversation with the school, which happened on a regular basis, he was usually in the office with me listening. So, or a part of it. Or if I was writing an email to the school, he was CC'd in the email. So there was really no reason for us to have this conversation because he was a part of the conversation. So he kind of knew from day one. As a dad, I think that a lot of times it falls onto the plate of who's the disciplinarian in your household. They're the one. So I was the disciplinarian. I'm mom. So that was kind of the role that I assumed. And because we had a child through a different administration team go through this exact same middle school who had a little issues and they were resolved, we had no reason to believe that the school system was going to fail our daughter. So there was no reason to discuss it.
Dianne explains how they felt about the situation as it was occurring. I asked if they had the 1980s mentality.
I think our personality is not, we weren't frustrated. I think we were disappointed. I think that we were, we weren't angry and worried about the situation because we had no reason to be. I think we were frustrated with what was going on. I think we treated it as if it was almost like a nuisance in our life. Like, can't you just fix this? Back in the 80s, a kid misbehaves, they disciplined and you move on. We would give Mallory the same advice. Like, I remember someone gave me some advice and said, why don't you have the girls over? Maybe if they see Mallory as a friend and see her as a resource then have them come over. Well, we did that. So we brought the girls over. We saw the personality was just not a good match for Mal. So we told her, listen, stay away from those kids. They're not your friends. They're not somebody you should really be, involved with. So we asked her to respectfully stay away. And, again, That's that 1980s advice. Ignore it. Don't pay attention to those people. It wasn't, it'll go away.
Dianne explains Mallory's relationship with the girls that targeted her.
No, they were never really friends at one time, but these girls were kind of like, and I think it's important that, and this is where teachers and I think administrations play an important role. Just like we have society cliques in the adult world, they have that at school. So these girls were not the quote unquote popular girls. These girls were the kind of like next in line popular girls. So it was almost like they weren't the perceived rich popular girls. They were kind of like the lower end popular girls. And I know that that's really hard to say, but there are these different classifications based on neighborhoods, based on diversity, based on all that. So yes, Mallory desperately wanted to be friends with these girls. And so did she put herself in a position to not say be picked on, but she wanted to be accepted. We all want to be in an accepted position. So she did want to sit at their lunch table. She wanted them to like her, just like we all do. And so I don't think that she necessarily wanted to be best buds with them, but I definitely think she wanted them, if they like me, they won't pick on me. That was her process in her mind.
The discussion now turns to the role that technology played on the targeting of Mallory.
Well, number one, I think that technology gives kids access to a wide range of people, places, and things, right? So normally your bullying ends on the playground. I think that kids have learned, and this is where this was part of after everything happened. I asked my older daughter, Carly, I said, don't you guys have school fights anymore? And she's like, that's a weird question, Mom. And I was like, no, but answer me. I was like, Carly never came home from school since she's in high school now for 2 years. She never came home and said, oh my God, there was a throwdown in the lunchroom, and that was a normal day for us in school. Well, and this is why I think that technology plays a real important role that we're not paying attention to as parents. Carly says, no, there's no school fights anymore. And I did just what you did. What are you talking about? There's no school fights anymore. She's like, no. She goes, you can get in really big trouble for having a school fight. It's considered assault, and you could be suspended, you could be expelled. So I think where technology plays a role, you piss me off, you're looking at my girlfriend, you're looking at my boyfriend. I know that I can't fight you at school because I'm going to get in trouble. But I've learned that if I go home and I can, behind the screen, can lash out at you, I think all this pent up anger has no place to go. We've taught our children that anger is a bad thing. Jealousy is a bad emotion. We've taught them that, but yet they still experience those emotions. They've not been taught how to do so. So behind the screen, they are Billy badasses. And by the way, there's no laws. Whereas if I assault you and I punch you in the face at school, I'm going to be suspended and I'm going to get in trouble. But if I call you the biggest names behind the screen at school or at home, nobody's going to do anything. So I think technology has become an outlet for our children to express normal everyday behaviors. And because they're behind the screen, wow, they can really elevate that. Whereas if they had to say it to your face, they're not as powerful. But behind the screen, and that to me is the most dangerous aspect of the computer technology.
Dianne shares what she believes is the biggest misconception about bullying.
I think the biggest misconception is that we still feel like, why can't you just let it roll off? And to me, that is going after the victim to solve their problem. We should be going after the perpetrators to not do the behavior. We're constantly, and this is a societal problem. I think our biggest problem is I think that we go after victims a lot in this country. The victims, which by the way, a lot of times takes a lot of courage to come forward and say, I've been victimized, I've been picked on, I'm not liked, I've been raped, I've been assaulted. For the victim to have the courage to come forward and then we say, well, prove it. We're in a prove that this happened to you rather than, oh my God, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Let me go after the perpetrators. So to me, the biggest misconception that we have as a society is that we have to change that conversation. The other thing I think is that in order for children to, or even adults, to make changes, they have to be able to predict the consequences of their behavior. So I know that if I'm speeding 55 miles an hour in a 25, I'm getting a ticket. I can predict that. Children cannot predict the consequences because it's not consistent. If you go to an urban area, they'll throw the book at you. Think about an African-American citizen's got a small bag of weed. We're ready to lock him and throw away the keys. Whereas a child or somebody that maybe is affluent, they get a big enough lawyer, they get off with a few things. Behavior in this country is not consistent, and the consequences are not consistent. So the children learn from a very early on age, maybe I'll get in trouble, maybe I won't. That's got to change. I think that children need to know that if I like something, heart something, call someone a slut online, do these things, there's going to be huge consequences. I'm in trouble. That includes not just problems at school, but if you're under investigation, you are immediately expelled from the soccer team. You're immediately expelled from the cheerleading team. And then once you are found not guilty or that it is, then you go in. But while that investigation is going on, all privileges on both parties should be suspended while this is going on. If we took that type of hard line with our kids, I can tell you firsthand, you know why I know this is true? You see a cop, you're speeding. What's the first thing that you do? You back off and hit your brakes. And you're like, oh, even though you know that they've hit their lights and they're coming around, you immediately start playing in your head the consequences. Oh, I'm running late to this. I'm running that. Oh, no, I'm going to get. You immediately start thinking of your story. You immediately respond because you don't want to get into trouble. Why don't we treat our children that way? It's just a speeding ticket, right? No one dies from that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But we respond because we know we don't want those consequences. Our children need to be in the same category.
I asked Dianne if she feels like she failed as a parent.
Sometimes, sure. I think that the guilt associated with not knowing that your child is going to hurt themselves, that's incredibly painful and something that I will live with for the rest of my life. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? I knew that she was distressed that day. I knew she was upset. Why didn't I take her with me? Why didn't she go to the office? All of these hindsight questions. So of course we feel responsible or feel guilty to some degree. I can say confidently that, which is why we were able to launch our lawsuit against the school system, is that I have a paper trail the size of a phone book. I did fight for Mallory, and I did everything that I possibly knew within my. Could I have done more? Sure. But everybody says that. We all say we could have done more. But I think in that moment, yeah, I really did fight for her. I did everything that a normal, everyday parent would do. And unfortunately, in my scenario, it wasn't enough. But sure, we feel very guilty as parents.
Dianne explains her biggest regret.
I think I should have gotten her mental support. I think underestimating the gravity of having someone spew hate at you, I underestimated how those words really did affect her psyche. I think not having given her access to a counselor on our side that helped her build resilient behavior, I think that's my biggest regret, is that I should have seen that this was a bigger problem, one that I'm not trained in, and I should have sought medical attention. I should have gone to the mental health community and said, my daughter has hate being spewed at her. That should number one. Number two, rather than trying to fight the battle via email and phone calls, I should have hired an attorney. I should have said, you know what, after 2 or 3 months of this, I should have said, you know what, they're not protecting her. They're not taking it serious. I should have hired an attorney. However, the school's pocketbook for defending themselves is a lot deeper than mine. And I'm a small business owner. So as much as I look at that and say I should have hired an attorney, I think now there are attorneys that will be specializing in anti-bullying school litigation. 11 months ago, a year ago, I don't think that would have been the same case. I think there's been a lot of conversations since Mallory's died that has brought lawyers saying we're going to specialize in this. Because Mallory didn't have a 504, she didn't have a IEP.
An IEP is an individualized education program. It is a written document that's developed for each public school child who is eligible for special education. The IEP is created through a team effort and is reviewed at least once a year. A 504 plan is a blueprint for how a school will provide support and remove barriers for a student with a disability so that the student has equal access to the general education curriculum.
Because she didn't fall in those disability categories, that's really where the lawyers specialize in. And I really, that exact day, I should have taken her, I should have kept a closer eye on her. I should have kept her with me. I should have just, been a little bit more mindful that she was in distress.
I followed up with this question. Was Mallory any more distressed on the day of the meeting with the school? The day that she took her own life?
No, as a matter of fact, she wasn't sad. She was mad. She kept saying to me, she kept saying, because we were at the school the day that she died. And so for 3 hours in a meeting, and she just kept saying to me, you made it worse. You've made it worse. You made it worse. So her perception was by me trying to go to the school and fight rather than just let it alone, leave it, let it lie, because she wanted to solve her own problems. I think I didn't understand the gravity of her saying to me, you just made it worse, and what that meant to her. So I think the fact that's why I call it impulsive, is the fact that she came home, she reacted to the scenario throughout the day, didn't believe that the adults in her life could solve her problem. So therefore, she reacted impulsively.
Dianne explains her reaction to Mallory saying, you just made it worse.
I just said to her to trust me. I just kept saying, I understand. And she only had 5 days left of school. So I kept saying to her, you don't have to go back now. We'll get you a new school. We were in the process of looking at other schools to move her to. So we just kept saying, Mal, we'll find you a new school. What I didn't realize is that because she had been living with this hate for so long, and every day I made her go back to school, she didn't trust me or believe me that I wasn't going to make her go to school the following day. She trusted, because of her previous experience, that I was going to send her to school. I wasn't, but she didn't believe me. She didn't believe that I was going to keep her home.
I asked Dianne if there was any particular piece of advice that she gave Mallory that she wished that she hadn't.
I think that I told Mallory that those girls didn't matter. I think that I told her they're no big deal. They're not your friends. They're not your peers. They don't matter. I think in hindsight, I look at that and their peers matter to them more than we think that they do. It doesn't matter that they're not friends. They're still peers. And what your peers say about you is extremely important. And we know this to be true because there is a case study out that shows from preschool, as preschool children, it's my mommy said. My mommy says I have to do this. My mom says I have to do that. Kindergarten, first and second grade, it's my teacher said. My teacher says I have to do my homework. My teacher says I have to do math. My teacher says I have to brush my teeth. Third, fourth, and up, it's my friends say. I devalued the fact that I thought that the only people that were important to Mallory were her friends. What I didn't realize is that the people that are important to these tweens are their peers. It doesn't matter whether they're friends or not, it's their peers. And we need to, as parents, understand that nothing we say, nothing we do is more important than what their peers say and do. And that to me is my, one piece of advice.
As parents, we need to be careful about minimizing our kids' feelings. We don't establish trust by brushing off their concerns. We need to be more mindful about what they're saying.
100%. Yeah, so when someone says that, it needs to be, well, when someone says that, how does that make you feel? Instead of asking our kids, how was your day at school? We should be asking, how do you feel today? We should be more in tune to their emotional well-being than their academics, and we're not. We're focused on, what'd you get on your math test? What'd you get on your chemistry test? What did you do at school today? Did you eat? We're so conditioned to cover the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of food and nutrition and all those things, that their emotional intelligence is never part of our conversation. And I think that that's a very dangerous perspective. However, the school systems have taught us that, right? Standardized testing, this is important. We're gonna teach for the test. When schools start to value emotional intelligence, and when schools start teaching kids the emotions behind the symptoms, then maybe the parents will get on board. The schools have decided that what's important and what's not important, and so therefore they're the professionals and we follow their lead. And so we need to definitely look at, what our kids are thinking, what's being said about them, and understanding their perception is their truth. 100%.
Dianne goes into empowering our kids to participate in deciding what the potential solutions are. As part of the bullying series, I will be bringing you an episode dedicated to empowering our kids.
And the other thing is we should, as parents, I think in all of this, what I've learned is I will ask my other children, what would you like for me to do? Rather than coming to the table, it's almost just like when the wife just wants to vent about how crappy her day is and the husband's wanting to solve the problem. Well, a lot of times parents want to solve the problems for their kids. Maybe they don't want the problem solved. Maybe they just want to vent. And I think that we as parents have to say, well, thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate it. What would you like mommy and daddy to do? They may not have a solution, but giving them the ability to solve some of their problems might open up different doors for us and other options. We're ready to pitchfork the school and ready to go down there when maybe that's not the solution. Maybe they actually have a solution. Maybe they just want to move classes. Maybe they need a break from school. Maybe they're telling you that they want to be homeschooled. Well, you need to dig in a little deeper, but ask them what their solutions are.
The discussion turns to Mallory's Army.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the number one thing, great transition into Mallory's Army is Mallory's Army. The number one thing that we try to encourage is empowering students. We use words like upstanders. We use words like that, but empower them, teach them to be humanitarians, teach them how to stand up for other children. Let them have a little bit of say-so. Imagine children have divorced parents. So they're now managing 4 adults in their personal life, aunts, uncles. They're in middle school. They've got 6 teachers plus their special teachers. Let's make the assumption that. So they've got coaches. At the end of the day, a normal everyday child could be easily managing 12 to 15 adult personalities, not to mention their peers. That is a whole lot for them to try to manage during the time in their life when they don't have the frontal cortex of their brain developed. They're going through hormonal changes, and we're going to throw 15 adult different style personalities. Well, this teacher wants her homework done on the blackboard. This one wants it done on the smart board. This one wants it done in Google Classroom. Mom's cooking chicken for dinner, but daddy wants spaghetti. Like, literally think about what their day is really like and the stress that we put on them. It's scary. It really is. These kids don't know how to be kids because we've scheduled them to death. We never give them say-so. These kids are the CEOs of their hallways. We need to empower them to make sure that they're running an effective company rather than one that's, a dangerous company.
Dianne describes the moment when Mallory's Army was conceived.
We were sitting on the back porch, and it was literally, it was right after things had happened. And my friend kept saying to me, Dianne, you got to speak out. You've got to speak out. And I remember looking at her with my husband, Seth, and we were kind of sitting around. And I said, I don't want my daughter to be the poster child for anti-bullying or suicide awareness. And she looked at me straight faced and she goes, she already is. She goes, she already is. And when she said that in that statement, I realized that my daughter already was a statistic, that she was the poster child, whether I wanted to follow this. So I was either going to tell the story or strangers was going to tell the story. So I looked at Seth and I said, I have to do this, right? And he smiled, knowing my personality, and said, yeah, I know. And so I said, I won't do our family harm. I said, I will make sure that I honor our daughter and that I don't hurt our family, but I think I do need to speak out. There were 2 children in the town behind us, next town over. 2 children, almost a year before Mallory died, that as a result of mental illness, bullying at school, died by suicide. And no one talked about those kids. And I thought, what a shame. Maybe had somebody spoke out, maybe if somebody had said something, it would have prompted me to have a different conversation. I owe it to my community to empower them and educate them and let them know that this is a conversation you've got to be having. So as a result of that, that's kind of how this whole thing took place.
Mallory's Army is about changing behavior.
Yeah, because I believe that you're right. So those other things are symptoms of the one thing. So bullying, mental illness, those are all symptomatic things. Seth came up with this, and I don't give him much credit, but the one credit I am going to give him is that we were sitting around talking when we were trying to think about our mission statement and who we are. And he said, Dianne, what's the one thing that we can change today? And so I started thinking, tangible laws, this, and this. And he goes, no. The one thing that we can change today that doesn't cost anything, has no race associated with it, doesn't have an economic status to it, doesn't matter where you live, where you go to school, behavior. Today, we can choose, and it not cost us anything, to live a better life. So if behavior modification is really that simple, then we have to make a positive, mindful decision to behave a certain way. And I always give this example in my presentations, is that people always ask, well, where do the kids learn it from? Well, they learn it from us. How many times are we in the car saying, get in the car, hurry up, hurry up. Oh my God, here comes that mom. I can't stand her. I don't want to drive her kid. Oh my God, here she comes. Get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. And we immediately start. Well, what kind of message is that sending to our kids in the back seat? That it's okay not to like someone. And it is okay not to like them, but it's not okay to be mean to them. It's not okay to talk trash behind their back in front of young, impressionable children. If you don't like, say, Susan, and you don't want to drive her children, then give Susan the respect of saying, I'm sorry, it's not a good fit. Give her that and say, I'm not bullying you. Our carpool is full and I'm sorry. Or how bad would it hurt to give Susan's kid a ride? Maybe Susan's going through a nasty divorce. Maybe she is barely got 2 nickels to rub together and she's really struggling. Would it be so horrible if her kid, who is so annoying, would it be horrible if they sat in your car for the 15 minutes to the soccer field? I mean, maybe we just need to have a little bit of compassion. So I always say that we should be the kind of person that we want to meet, not the kind of person we want to be. Who do we want to be a friend to? Who's the type of person that we want to attract? That's the personality that we should be putting out there, right? Those are the people that I want to meet. I want to be friends with people that are like-minded. So then therefore I can't be a raving jerk and then expect not to attract raving jerks. And that's really what I think behavior modification, it comes into play and why it's so important and very easy. Imagine if we all just walked a little softer, held the door open. And by the way, it's not so late that we can't turn back those times, right? Community used to be really important to us. We would go to the neighborhood store where, Mr. and Mrs. Jones knew our kids and knew our family. And so it's not too late to turn that back. We just have to make a conscious effort to do so. And it's not saying that you have to love everybody. I don't want people to think that I'm expecting us to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and expect us to be. But we don't have to behave the way that we do. There are simple steps that we could take, just like turning your cell phone off when you're in the grocery store line or hanging up your call. I'm not saying don't talk in the grocery store, but when the person behind the register is ringing up your groceries, don't be on the phone as if they're insignificant. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. Tell the person you'll call them back. You're not that important. And engage in the person who's there serving you. Don't take an iPad to dinner. Have a device-free dinner. Start making steps to engage in the human aspect around you. It's called social media, but there's nothing social about it. It's so isolating. I think that it should be isolation media, because it really does teach children how to have this unhuman aspect of their lives. And I think that we as parents have to really dive into that and recognize that it's a problem. And I think that we have to be paying attention to it now, so that the people that are developing the robotics and the technology, and to start now incorporating into the evolution of the technology, also developing the social skills along with that, right? So we're a reactive society. Well, we don't put up a stop sign until a child dies. We don't put in seatbelt laws until a child dies. So instead of being, maybe we need to, as we're developing this technology, be proactive and say, okay, these are the dangers that our children are going to face before we develop self-driving cars. Maybe we put the infrastructure in place to support those self-driving cars. We don't need pedestrians dying and then going, whoa, we don't need self-driving cars. Maybe we develop the infrastructure for the technology and how it's going to benefit our lives, and then develop the technology. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of confidence in that, but I'm trying.
The name Mallory's Army was meant to be.
It chose us. I didn't. My friend that said, she had said, Dianne, I'm going to put up this page, and it just organically, I really don't actually know how it happened. All of a sudden, the next thing I know, there's this page up, and it says, and it just was called We're Mallory's Army. It was almost as if. And so, but what I love about it is, if you think of the definition of army, it is a group of like-minded people who seek resolution, but prepared for battle. And I think that really does define what Mallory's Army stands for. None of us want to fight. We're not looking to pitchfork it. We're all very like-minded people who love our children, love our community, and recognize that there's a problem. We want to write laws and find resolution to make a change. And if that doesn't happen, then hell yeah, we'll fight. But that's not the platform of what it is that we're trying to do. So I find it really interesting that it just organically grew on its own. So I'm lucky in that manner. I think that that's what makes this movement so important and so great, is that Mallory loved the color of light blue, dark blue, that turquoise color. So that's really where it came. Obviously, the awareness ribbon in the blue camo makes sense because it's called the Army. So then camo. And the blue rock that you see with the little blue awareness ribbon, that was a girlfriend of mine at a creek that Mallory always played at. And she put the rock with the band on it, propped it up on her knee, took her iPhone and took a picture. And it was the essence of what Mallory is. So I love the fact that her name and her brand and everything that she stands for happened as a result of other people in her life, rather than me sitting behind a computer saying, what's the logo going to look like? What's this? This is a children's foundation. This is a community's foundation. I just happen to be the voice, but the reality is that the images, the logos, the t-shirts, the lifestyle, everything, that is the community that came together to really develop the concept.
Dianne leaves us with some final words.
So number one, thank you to people like yourself, because I think that without people like you wanting to share our story and the thousands of other stories that are out there, I think that it's important, because one person can't do it alone. So I think it's really important to recognize that one person cannot do this alone. So thank you to you and your voice and your listeners and the people that you're going to share this with. So that's first and foremost. Number two, it's not bullying. It's humiliation. It's intimidation. It's exclusion. It's isolation. Parents, stop using the word bullying and start using the verbs that are actually happening. When we deal with the actions and the verbs, then we can find a solution. But if we umbrella this under a term that the kids are so sick of listening to, it's just falling on their deaf ears. They're tired of it, and so are the school systems. Number three, don't wait until there's a problem to get a solution. Parents have to be in a perpetual state of education. You need to do the research, particularly the parents that are in third grade. Start preparing for middle school. I've never spoken to one person that said, hey, middle school for me was really cool and great. We all talk about how middle school was absolutely the worst years of our lives. Well, then maybe it's time to change middle school. Maybe we don't need children with 6 teachers and floating from one program to another back and forth. Maybe we need to dummy it down. We need to get involved. So parents need to be in a perpetual state of education. They need to participate in their Board of Ed meetings. These are the people hiring the people that are going to educate your children. If you don't know the names of every single one of your Board of Ed members and what their philosophy is, then you need to be sitting at that meeting understanding what's going on. It is your community. Everybody bitches and complains about how high their taxes are, yet they never question who their superintendent is. So that's the third thing. And then, of course, lastly, I would say to the school systems, wave the white flag. Wave the white flag. This problem is bigger than you. Stop trying to self-contain raging water. It is bigger than you. We have to use technology to combat technology. We have to recognize that we need discipline in our schools, and we have to not be afraid to piss off 10% of the population so that 100% can benefit. It is okay that if you piss off the boosters kid, it's okay. The boosters president kid will get over it. And if they pull their funds from your program, then that's okay. As soon as they do, there'll be somebody else in line that wants to step up to the plate. It is time that the school system recognize that this problem is so much bigger than they are, and that they need to enlist, and I use the word enlist, they need to enlist law enforcement. Discipline equals law enforcement. Education, stick to educating our children. Stop being the one-stop shop for everything. You can't do it. And if you've got a parent that is a problem and they are not listening to you or they're not behaving, then you need to have that child removed from your school system. Remove them. And to say, well, no child left behind and everybody's entitled to an education. No, we're entitled to one thing in this world, oxygen. Not water, not food, not shelter. We're entitled to oxygen. That is the only thing that we're entitled to. Some people are going to drink bottled water, and some people are going to have to drink water out of a creek. That's just our society. We have to be willing. Should the people who drink bottled water help the people that are drinking water out of a creek? Absolutely. But when you stick to what it is that you're good at, like education, then you are a niche in that market. I don't go to Walmart for designer clothing. I shouldn't be going to the school system for disciplinary issues. I don't feel like it. The laws are written so that the schools are in control. And I think that's one of the first things that has to happen is that there needs to be a partnership between school systems and law enforcement in an effort to make sure that it's a community approach to solve a community problem. So that's really my soapbox. Those are the things that I feel are important. And it doesn't stop today. So we solve all this problem. As soon as we're solving this problem, technology goes 1,000 miles an hour. We go 5 miles an hour. Again, perpetual state of continuing education to really understand the gravity of what our children are facing.
After a year of researching stories, I now strongly believe that bullying in today's world is misunderstood, and Mallory's story is an indicator of that. New Jersey has been proactive in trying to address bullying, implementing policies and procedures to help guide schools through the bullying situations. They added specialists at many levels. They added policies to help guide training. They made it so that schools and their staff could be held accountable, which is why the Grossmans are suing the school and their staff. You heard all of that in part 1 of this story. This should not have happened, and yet it still did. Those guidelines were in place over 6 years before the attacks on Mallory. Today, Dianne gifted us her hindsight, walked us through her journey, living through this devastating tragedy. I encourage you to follow the Mallory's Army Facebook page. Dianne regularly posts updates that provide weekly insights into her journey. Mallory and Dianne are hand in hand guiding our way. They are a guiding light for us. Let their story be our hindsight, our clarity. Life affords us moments, and none of them are guaranteed. But every moment we have is a moment to change how we choose to express ourselves. So let's choose kindness, teach it, embrace it. Thanks to Dianne and the Grossman family for trusting me with their story. I am deeply honored and grateful that they shared their story with us. We honor Mallory and the countless others who have left us too soon by applying what we have learned from their stories. The Mallory's Army website states, "Don't just teach kindness, be kindness." Let's be united in this fight. For the Grossman family, it is now and forever will be a bracelet kind of life. I believe this quote by Mahatma Gandhi sums up the message for today. Quote, "We but mirror the world. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. We need not wait to see what others do." End quote. All of Dianne's contact information can be found on awareness.podcast.com/guests. In 2 weeks, I will be sharing with you my encounter with a school official. At the time, I was recording the conversation for documentation purposes, and after much back and forth, I have decided to share it with you so that we could learn from it. So let me leave you with a few questions as we close out this episode. What if the training given to the schools is wrong? What if the training given is aimed at addressing the symptoms of the problem and not the problem? Could this be why bullying is still on the rise in New Jersey and in most places? We will be exploring this in a few weeks as part of the bullying series, so stay tuned. The Awareness theme intro music was provided by Shane Yoder and his team at puttheminasong.com. I would like to thank my family for their support. Without them, this would not be possible. Until next time, stay aware, be aware, and I'll talk to you soon.